Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Taya from the Pacific Northwest, and she wanted to share her Bigfoot encounters and experiences with all of us. And it was really exciting hearing about these encounters in the Pacific Northwest because that area is just so dense, and you hear so many Bigfoot stories from there, and it's a really great area to look for Sasquatch. It would certainly be a dream of mine to one day visit the Pacific Northwest and search for Sasquatch with other like-minded researchers. If you have had a Bigfoot encounter in the Pacific Northwest or in the Rocky Mountains, feel free to reach out to me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. If you guys can, help support the channel in any way possible, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you can, purchase some merchandise on my Spreadshirt website. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive straight into Taya's Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the state of Oregon. Alright, Taya, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Taya, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Well, I'm from Oregon currently. I've lived in Washington and have lived all over the Northwest, basically. My occurrences happened in Oregon, and they were really eye-opening, I guess you could say. I guess everybody could say that. I know that my thoughts of something bigger than us started when I was probably, I guess my cousin and I and my sister were probably 10, 11, and 5. And we would stay on my grandmother's ranch in the summertime. She had a big 40-acre field out alongside of her house, which joined with this really fast rushing river and a big, it was like probably second old growth timber and some old growth timber growing in there. It was extremely thick. And the stumps in there were so big where they'd been cut down that we could actually sit on them like they were a big table. The three of us would crawl up on there. And that property didn't belong to my grandparents. It belonged to the rancher next door. And when he had a cow die, he dragged it out there. And we were warned, don't go out there. Just don't go out there. And there was this old rickety log bridge. It was the creepiest thing. And it felt creepy to go across it, but not because of the danger of it as, a structure, but it felt dangerous to cross over for what might be under it. And it was just a gully under it. It wasn't a creek or anything like that. But we'd go sneaking across there and we'd find skeletons from the cows and we'd be messing around with the ribs and sword fighting and this and that. And we got home and Grandma wanted an explanation for that. And she said, "You don't go back out there." She said, "That's where the hide behind is. And you don't want to meet the hide behind." And I've thought about that for so many years, how we felt so creepy, like something was under that bridge and something was there with us. But we were kids and we just blew it off, go sword fighting and all that stuff. So that was my beginning of, having Grandma always say the hide behind. Don't go out in the forest because of the hide behind for years and years. Up in the berry fields by Mount Adams, he taught us how to read tracks for cat and bear and coyote and everything. Grandpa was a good tracker. He taught us all that. And we'd go up and pick huckleberry. And we never thought one bit about Bigfoot being up there, not one time. We'd go crawl under a huckleberry bush. Instead of picking them, we'd pick them, but we'd be eating them and throwing them on each other. And Grandma would say, "Watch where you're going because they'll hide behind." My mom would always say, "Just don't wander off, skookums out there." And I never knew what that meant. They are passed away now, and I can't even ask them if they meant Bigfoot, if they meant what all of the Native American people talk about. And so as I grew up, I never thought more about it until the 60s when they had that one sighting. There was a big deal about it. And it seems like there was a man that opened a gift shop. He had all these tracks and all this paraphernalia that he had up there, and he was a researcher. And I briefly remember about him because at that time I was in high school. I was doing my high school girl thing. And then later when I got married, and I can't even say why that I did this, but when I lived in town with my grandmother, I never was afraid to have the curtains open. It never bothered me. I mean, people would walk by in this tiny little town. No, everybody knew everybody. Nobody cared. They weren't peeping. And I get married and I move up on this farm way out in the woods. And the first thing I had to do is get curtains and put on the windows. And at night, I would clothespin them shut because I couldn't close them any other way. And my husband said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just have to do it because I think Bigfoot's looking in." And I don't even know why I had Bigfoot on my mind. I'm just thinking that it was there. I felt it. Um, there's no reason for me to be afraid of it, not whatsoever. I was more afraid of hearing coyotes screaming at night rather than the thought of Bigfoot, really, until nighttime. So, moving on 20 years, I and my second husband then would be out. We had jet boats and we'd be out on different various rivers in uh, Oregon. And we stopped at a beach. We were going to like have a picnic before we went on up river to camp out. And we pulled into the beach and we could see human footprints going down to the river and back up behind this rim rock. And we smelled just this god awful smell. But I didn't know anything about Bigfoot still. Just that one silly little thought of closing my curtains at night. Never thought about it again. And we smelled this terrible smell and we saw these footprints. Well, that river happens to be a river that's commonly rafted in the summertime. And you don't know who might be in the raft, if it's a group of people that are honest or if it's someone that isn't honest. So we saw the footprints, we smelled the smell, we said, we better take off. And now, we put that odor to elk, that a bull elk must have been around. It must be in the rut because of the odor. And thought that it was just a rafter that left those big footprints coming down to the river and back up. So that was what I think was an unknown experience. And then I moved out to the wilderness. And in that time, I don't know, almost 20 years went by. And we had a dissolution in our marriage. And there was, before we divorced, there was the opportunity to buy this house in the wilderness. And so we bought the house, and as the divorce happened, which was weird timing, but it happened, and I moved out there alone. So I was 12 years in the wilderness, out there splitting my wood, collecting it. I finally made friends with this old neighbor man. He needed wood, he needed help, I needed help. So we'd go way up in the mountains and get firewood. We never saw one thing. We didn't even see a bear when we were up there. It just felt like a very nice forest, and that there wasn't anything that was out of whack, like there, other than the common hunting that animals do about each other, which everybody says nature is beautiful, and it's not really. It's everyday survival, and but it felt calm and good. So we'd get our firewood, come down, put it away, and I would have strange sounds around my house. And I hadn't really given it any thought until all my memory of that started rushing back to me after our most current experiences. And now I know that I had one, maybe two Bigfoot on my property or around my property for 12 years. And my first experience with it was a night right shortly after I bought it and was settled in. I went down to my creek where I irrigated from, and I was uh, in those days with my pump. I had to go ahead and get some water in it, prime it, get it going. And I bent down to do that to get water out of the creek, and this most god awful scream, howl, big, earth shaking, rib cage shaking scream happened. It scared me so bad that I ran to the house in just a second. And that was the first and only time I heard it for for years. That I had things going around, walking around. I heard things up on my deck walking, but we had cougar. I had cougar in my yard, and they would cross through and follow a game trail. And in the wintertime, they would come down this kind of a logging road, cut across my property, and go in my creek bed and follow it on the ice out to the river. But in the summertime, they did what they wanted to do, and I could hear them on my deck. I could hear them messing around out in my yard. My dogs would um, they could smell them through the door without the door open, and they'd get their hackles up. So I just assumed all the time that it was cougar or bobcat coming through. That then there was noises out there that I had to go look at, and I saw two sets of red eyes behind my neighbor's apple tree. And one was probably 10 feet up, and another one was about 8 feet up. And where it was, it couldn't have been owls, which we had tons of owls up there, but it couldn't have been owls because they were out near the tinier leaves and getting apples. And when I opened the door and shined my light out there, they both just froze in place and just stood there. And I'm thinking, it's just raccoon. So I just, you know, closed the door and never thought anything more of it. But yet, for me now, that was another pure sign that I had a couple people, first people that visited my yard. One night I went out to my larder, my pump house, and my Fred Meyer's grocery store where I had all my goods. And it was pitch dark. I had my porch light on and I stepped in there and I stepped out. And when I stepped out, every hair on my body stood right up on end. And I stepped backwards back in the door. I knew something was wrong. And I took a deep breath and I'm like, okay, just step out like there's nothing wrong and just do what you're going to do normal. But I couldn't do it normal. I stepped out and I turned around and I faced the way that I felt the danger coming from. And I truly believe now that it had to be a Bigfoot standing there because there was one place right in the middle of my flower bed and my pump house that was blacker than the rest of the nighttime. So I just simply stared straight at it and backed up and went up my stairs and in my house. So it went along fine. I never heard anything more. I never thought about Bigfoot. Even then, I wasn't thinking about Bigfoot, but I was having these weird experiences. And then the neighbors started having weird experiences. And the gal said, I had to have a bear and a cub up here. They came in, they opened the door to my spare room for my guests, and they got into the freezer and they took a bunch of meat out and they closed the freezer, but the meat was gone and the door was left open. She said it had to be a bear. However, bears can't open doorknobs. And if they're going to get in a freezer, it's very common that if they find a refrigerator or freezer, they'll go for anything that smells like bacon. And perhaps they would take the meat if they could smell venison or whatever beef. But they like the smell of all of the insulation. And for bears, they claim that bears smell bacon with that. And it wasn't tore up. It was opened up. It was disarrayed inside. Meat was missing. And they left the door open. Nothing tore up. And so they um, they kind of left it at a bear and had everybody on guard that there might be a bear in the neighborhood. So we were on bear alert up there in the wilderness, and there was nothing more ever happened. And it wasn't uncommon to have bear. Excuse me. So it wasn't, as I said, uncommon to see bear there. I mean, it was wilderness, and I think in the 12 years I lived out there, I saw probably 14 bears in that time. The cougars were, as people thought, were running around like crazy, but cougar travel, and so I don't believe there was as much cougar count as people were counting. But I knew I had one female with a cub. She always had one, sometimes two cubs coming through my place. But she didn't bother around the house that I knew more of than hearing things on my deck. She would go down by the river and just lay and wait for deer that come through on that game trail from across the river. And then we had another incident where a man said, well, he thought that we had a grizzly bear in there. And he said, because this thing stood up and it stood up from behind his lumber pile and it was 4 feet above his lumber pile. I think it was a bit baby grizzly bear, he said. We never had any baby grizzly bears there. We didn't have grizzly bears there. So I'm thinking that he probably saw a baby Bigfoot there that was curious and messed around, because a couple of years later I was out on my deck and I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I just had a kind of a weird feeling, but nothing great. It's the forest, things move around. All of a sudden I had a scream right up behind my garage that was sounded like they had taken a really deep breath and started to scream, that it sounded like it was gurgling on blood or saliva or something. And it was so loud that my girlfriend on the phone could hear it. And she asked me what it was. So I told her I didn't know what it was, but I was running in the house. And that's when I believed that it was probably a Bigfoot. A couple of years went by and I hadn't heard any more noise. And I had my not my third husband, like anybody needs to know, but um, he was there, and we had decided to he wanted geese and chickens and things like that. And one night we heard our female goose screaming, and I ran out to see what was going on, and she was gone. She had been picked up and was clear across. I have 4 acres there. She was clear across all of that and across the river and up on the road. And I could hear her screaming and and everything until, you know, they did whatever they did with her. So I think, personally, I think that that could have been that creature, whatever it was, that got her, because it there was no feathers, there was nothing. She was so big and heavy, and I know how strong that cougars are and how they can carry a deer up into a tree and everything. But this goose was heavy enough and cumbersome enough that they would have had to drag it a little bit, because she was a very big white goose. So we believe that it was Bigfoot that took it, and then within a week something unhooked the hook on our chicken house, and all of our chickens were taken away in one night. And this was one of those big barn gate hooks that latches over into a U-shaped deal, and it wasn't easy to just you couldn't just go flip it. So we feel like that had to be a Bigfoot too, though we have no proof. We have no proof of any of this, but how how could chickens all be taken without one sound of chickens? And the chicken house happened to be just a little ways away from our bedroom window. There was not one chicken screaming for anything. So one got away and the rest were gone. We have no idea what did that, but long before I had my husband there, I had a premonition. I used to leave my doors open at night, and I had a premonition of a man standing outside of my door with it with longish hair and big, and like in my mind, like where blue jean jacket and blue jeans ready to step in the door. Now I'm wondering if I mean, it makes you second guess yourself when all the weirdness is going on. So I wondered if it was a premonition that maybe if I didn't start closing my door, I would have a creature from outside visiting me inside. So after that, I watched all my um, doors to be closed and everything. But that was just some of the peculiar stuff then. Bringing us up to 2009, uh, we were um, living over here. We got our fifth wheel and came over here near the Portland area to go to college. And in that time, we decided to sell our property over in the wilderness and just kind of settle down here, do college, and I was kind of getting tired of the prices of the fifth wheel trailer parks and stuff like that. And I liked my privacy. It was really kind of hard to have somebody like they were 6 or 8 feet away from you. And I just didn't like sharing my space that much. So I decided that I would get a hold of the Forest Service and talk to them in the Parks Department, talk to them about getting a gig watching like a gatekeeper at a state park. Well, we happened to stumble along this one gig where some people needed a, a forested area for logging and this and that to be um, watched over. And they come and interviewed us, and it just seemed like a good fit. So we went out and went ahead and moved our fifth wheel out there. And we were supposed to be there for 30 days for a trial. And they liked us. They decided, well, we're going to give you 90 days for stay here. We kind of want to trade people out and kind of rotate things. And we said, okay. And 9 years later is when our gig was up. It was kind of funny how we all got along and just fit right in so well. So we had a nice newer fifth wheel. It was about 44 feet long, and we built a deck out the back of it. So we like to cook outdoors anytime we could, even if it was kind of messy weather. We had a little building that we could set our barbecue in and just have it cooking out there and sit out there if it wasn't raining or something. And we started smelling this really odd smell every time we started cooking outside. And my husband said, that is just the grossest smell. I don't understand why it smells like that. And I said, well, we're in the forest. And he's always been from the city. And I said, we're in the forest. I said, there are every animal here that any forest has. We might have bear. We definitely have cougar, bobcat, coyotes. Everything's here, fox, everything. You got to expect that. And it's probably a cougar kill that you're smelling. And we don't know where it is. It'll go away. Don't worry, the birds take care of it. So we never thought about it too much until it happened the next day. And every time we were out there cooking, we had this really putrid smell like rotting meat. My husband said it smells like a person that hasn't taken a bath for years and their clothes are stinky, dirty, and he just hated the smell. But we have now figured that we were drawing them in with the smell of our barbecue stuff and that they were curious about us and that they were just watching. And where we lived, there had been an old homestead and it'd been bulldozed over. And it made a hump there. So anything big like a Bigfoot could stand there and only probably show from shoulder to head up, and you wouldn't see it if it would look like a stump if it was in there. So we think that we were a curiosity and we were being watched and the food smelled good and we were chitter chattering and it was entertained by us. Then we started deciding that, well, my husband and I like to help people. And so we had a way for getting food and delivering it to folks that were less fortunate than ourselves. And we would go through that food if there was fruit and vegetables, no meat or anything like that, but fruit and vegetables mostly. We would go through that and clean it up before we deliver it. Since we lived in the forest, we thought, okay, we'll start a little bit of a compost pile in one place, and then the fruit we would put out for the squirrels and the deer and just leave it there in that area where that old place had been pushed over, because nobody walked there, nobody would go there. And so we thought, yeah, we have all these squirrels and chipmunks and deer, why not? Well, pretty soon we started getting little things on our steps to our front door, and they were like, first it was like a cornelian agate, a small one, and then another time it was a bone button that looked like an old hand carved bone button. And I collected all of these. I kept them, but unfortunately, we were caught in the wildfires in 2020, so I don't have those anymore. But with buttons and pennies and feathers and a purple glass doorknob, and these things were coming to our door all the time. When it was pennies and buttons and a piece of pottery, just a shard of a broken bowl or plate, I told my husband all the time, so silly. I said, "Oh, look, we have fairies in our garden. Isn't this sweet? I guess I should put milk out for them at night so that they stay sweet to us." But when the doorknob came, and that was a little bit big for a fairy, I I was just like wondering if it was people coming in, because we would allow hiking in there. The people that owned it would allow people to dog walk in there. I thought, well, maybe people have found these in the forest and dropped them off by our house and said, here you go, put that with, if we're collecting stuff there or something. And it it never, and it kept happening, but we didn't think about it, too much. We just went about our business. He was working, I was working, and we were putting in, 30 hours or more there doing our work. We didn't watch TV, we didn't do anything. We just enjoyed the forest and did our work and came home and cooked outside and smelled the smell and had these weird little things happening. And then the whistling started. And I would step out of the house and I would get a whistle. And I said, "Oh, listen to that bird. Isn't that sweet?" And I'd whistle the same whistle back. And it would whistle back. And I'd whistle back. And I could sit out there forever whistling and getting a whistle back. And I said, "Isn't that cool? We have this bird that's just hanging around here." The funny thing is that bird hung around there for 9 years, and that bird never had another bird making that same sound except for me. There were no flocks of that bird. There wasn't a pair of those birds. There was one bird whistling at me that I was whistling back to. And it didn't dawn on me until after our biggest experience. And it kind of made it shocking that I was, in some essence, talking to a Bigfoot. So we kept doing our duties and having weird things happen. And pretty soon we started having these howls that I likened to the hounds of the Baskerville, because they were just god awful howls. And they weren't right up on top of us, they were more off into the forest towards the south. And I just thought there were somebody's neighbor dogs that were just having these horrible moments at night sometimes. And then we started having other problems with when the snow came. We happened to have this neighbor that had been born and raised there, and she felt like the whole mountain was hers. And she wasn't mean or anything like that, but she just felt that she had an ownership of it. And one night she came down into the place and skinnied past the building that was by our gate and kind of drove between it and the gate. And she was down there and she was swiping firewood. She should have asked, but she didn't. She come in after dark, camouflage truck, chainsaws running. And we didn't know, we were still new there then. We didn't know quite how to handle that. So we just waited to see what happened, and we could see her come out with her truck. So we kind of did detective work and finally saw the wood in the truck all up in her field. So we knew what she was up to. And one day she come down and she said, "Have you seen my horse?" And we said, "No." She says, "I grew up on this mountain." She said, "I know this place like the back of my hand. I love this mountain here." And she said, I go over the hill and I go down to a place where I can have a fire." She said, "Then I turn on my music and I dance under the moon." So we knew we were going to have probably a little bit issue there. But she left. We didn't have her horse. We didn't know where it was. She left. We never heard from her again until it was Christmas Day. And we were dressed up. We got all dressed up, to our friend's house for dinner. And we heard noise down in the forest. And we go, "Oh no, the neighbor's down there." So we go get our side by side, all dressed up for dinner, go down that crazy serpent type of road in the snow looking for this woman. And we went in circles and reverse circles for over an hour looking for this woman. We would get to the place we heard her, and we would hear her up the hill and behind us. So we'd turn around and go up there, and then we'd hear from a different part of the road or trail. And we played that game for well over an hour. And finally, we had no results. Nothing at all. We were going back and forth over our own tire tracks by that time. So I said, hey, why don't we just go out and lock the gate? And then if she's in here driven in, she won't be able to get out. She'll have to walk home. Then we'll know we caught her and everything's fine. We got home from Christmas dinner and there wasn't anybody trapped in there. So we're kind of speculative about what had actually been going on down there. If somebody was on foot or what. We never found any footprints or anything like that. Then we had trouble with hearing people talking down there, children playing, little children playing, laughing little children. They didn't sound like the regular children, but they were children. You could tell they were children. And my husband goes, "Oh my God, maybe somebody's got lost in here." So he took the side by side down and went and looked, and there was nobody there. Nobody, nothing. So we come back and chalked it up as we better watch this area or that area and maybe start closing a couple other gates and so forth. Then the owner had a get together there and people had been partying pretty hard. And we were a little concerned about it because it was dark. The area they were partying in was kind of dangerous. It had a bluff there. We were a little afraid that somebody would get hurt. After people were pulling out, mostly everybody gone, my husband heard this woman screaming and screaming. And I said, well, it's probably just a cougar, in season, or maybe it's a fox, a vixen. They scream, they sound really god awful, like a woman could sound too. And he went down there and he looked and looked and looked and looked. There was no woman down there. By the time he got back, there were no cars left. And so we said, okay, just a cougar looking for a mate or something. And then we just get cozied in for the night, summertime. And we hear the bathroom door down in the forest. We had 2 pit toilets there so that people walking could have conveniences. And we heard that door open and slam, open and slam, and open and slam. It sounded like children down there playing on that door. So again, Hot Wheels going down the hill, checking out what's going on. Why are people in there? This and that. Come spring, we found a deer carcass. It was all rolled up. Its head looked like it had been broken off. It wasn't sawed off. And the legs were, of course, the front legs were missing because they're the first to disappear off of a deer anyway. But the back legs were messed up. And the deer was boned out. It was boned out, though, all in one piece. It wasn't. I mean, I've been in a hunting family my whole life, and I know how to bone out a deer. And this was, all the parts were there except for the front legs, which are only held on by ligament anyway. So, or tendon. And so this deer didn't have any knife marks on it, like somebody taken the rib meat out for hamburger or something. There was no marks from a knife that broke into the bone whatsoever. It looked like flat teeth had just pulled the meat off and left it stringy from each bone. Like they could scrape the bone to a point that when the teeth broke off of the bone, then they just kept pulling back, and it made it look like little stringers off of every bone. We didn't, put that to any animal. We just said, okay, neighbor's been in here poaching, because she never gave us any reason to think different of her for different antics she'd already been doing. So we told the owner. He didn't really, he kind of blew it off. He didn't really care. He didn't think too much about it. So that was one eerie thing that we had to think about, is poaching and this and that. Again, now we believe that it was because we had a different kind of neighbor that was helping themselves to a lot of things in there. As years went by, things progressed. The whistling always happened, especially in the fall, spring and fall. The noises started happening. We heard people, walking by our house at night that shouldn't have been there. We could feel their footfalls in our house, but we would look out and nothing would be there. We had noises down in the forest all the time, with things breaking, trees breaking. There would not be any wind, no ice storms, nothing. A perfectly calm day. And all of a sudden it sounded like the forest came alive and it was breaking itself to pieces. And we would go look and we would find trees across the road and various different things like that. Excuse me. We would find trees across the road, and these weren't little trees. These were trees that were easily a foot and a half through, that had been just like uprooted off of the bank across the road. And other times there would be trees that had been broken off that were small saplings, and they would be laid across the road. There were uh, all types of things starting to pick up and go crazy, like little huts that we were finding that were odd little. They weren't like what we see with the typical structures that we've seen on some of the programs that um, the guys show, the TP structures and so forth. These were odd little things, like maybe little kids were making them, like maybe Bigfoot. I don't know, but they had put branches up against big trees and then stuff under them, and then looked like they'd sat in there. The the place that we found that the most is where a lot of the morel mushrooms grew and the chanterelles grew. We found little things like that, and so we reported them to the owner. Said maybe people are camping out. He said just tear them all down. So we tore them all down, but then they'd come back. We'd see them other places. The same thing. We'd go out and do repairs. There was hiker. We had a little hiker hut for people to rest in. And we decided that it needed to be repaired a bit. And we went down, and we were followed all the way down by something in the woods. And you could just get a glimpse of it and think something was there, and you had to end up just thinking, oh, it was just a shadow, or shadow of a bird flying over. While we were there, we know that it had followed us down and that it was watching us do what we were doing. And we had food there. We feel like, I don't know, maybe it could smell the food. We didn't know, but it was always seemed that there was something there that was very curious about us. My husband started a cairn, rock cairn, out in the forest, and that rock cairn started to grow too. And, as I said, we let people come in and walk, but there were certain trails and roads that they walked on, not out where he put this. So the odor came, and it was there as long as we were there until we left. It was there. And we feel after we've analyzed this, because when we moved away from there, it was 2018. And we've had a lot of times that listening now to different Bigfoot programs and everything, people have brought things to mind for us that we we had those experiences. It's like I'm happy to come and tell our experiences, but it's sort of like a repeat of what everybody else has already said because there's so much that seems to be identical when you have these creatures around. And that kind of amazes me. Like it's a rerun, or we're all in this hysterical thing of seeing something. Um, but we felt it there all the time. My husband went out because of that being an old homestead there. He found these plum trees, they're old plum trees, and he thought, well, he's just going to cultivate those a little bit and clean up around there and pick those because they were coming ripe to pick. So he went out and weed whacked and took care of those trees and got ready for going out the next day to go ahead and harvest. And the next day he went out to harvest. And this is just another unbelievable thing. But there was one of the prunes, the plums left on those trees, not one. The one he found was on the ground with an ant hole in it. The others had been completely harvested overnight, clear up in the top of the trees. They were just gone. So was it Bigfoot? Did he come along and his family and him make a harvest? Thank you very much for making way for us, or what? That it it was very strange that way. And when one Sunday we heard a lot of noise out there, and he said, there's somebody in here that shouldn't be in here, and I'm just tired of this. I want to rest. And he went out to deal with it. And he said he didn't know what it was. He snuck up on it. He put his Converse tennis shoes on. He said, I'm going to find this person. I'm going to sneak up on him. And he went out there and he said, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a person or not, but it went out of here like a butterfly and over the hill, and I couldn't catch up with it. And I said, well, if I was going to take you hunting with me, I'd probably put you out there in the front and dog them to me because you were pretty noisy down there. He said, that wasn't me being noisy. That was whatever was in front of me. So now we're, you know, always teasing our brains about, was that a Bigfoot brother right up there by our house, and he scared him away. We know that they kept getting closer and closer to us. And we felt like they were maybe, you know, just getting, I don't know how to friendlier or more familiar, I should say, with us because they were coming closer. They never got aggressive. They never touched our house. They walked by our house, We could feel them walk by our house. We had a camera we put out in front because we were watching for that neighbor to come sneaking in. And all we got was a giant eyeball looking in it one night through our TV set in our bedroom, which was pretty freaky and frightening to see an eyeball of something you couldn't identify. And we heard fake owls. We have bird owls in there. We had a pair of great horned owls in there, and we had a pair of barred owls in there. But it's really weird when you hear an eagle try at night when we don't have eagles here, at least not that time of year. Only when they fly through for their migration, they might rest. But there was an eagle in the night, and these fake barred owls, these different noises, and more children laughing. And when I go down in the forest, I'm a professional photographer, so I'd go down and do a lot of photography. And when I'd go down there, I'd have my dog with me. And my dog would be really frightened sometimes, a lot of times, maybe most times. And I remarked to my husband, I said, I can't go down there anymore and take any time because our little border collie starts pulling on my collar. Come on, let's go, let's go. And I'd say, don't be so jealous of the camera. We're going to stay down here for a little bit longer. And she would just turn and she would give her own kind of deep, almost that infra sound with a real deep, almost silent growl looking through the back of the side by side. And she'd start shaking. She said, okay, we better go. And I'd take off and take her home. Well, one day I was down there. We had some gals come in. They come in from the backside, come in through an old area that had trees taken down, and they could skinny through and into that property. And they come through with their horses, and they weren't supposed to be in there because of insurance reasons and stuff. And so we had to ask them to leave, but they'd still sneak in. And one day I was down there and doing my photography, and I was near a creek. There was a creek went through there, and I was near the creek. And I then felt something right there with me. And I was very creeped out about it. And I thought, okay, it's those ladies. They're in there. And I'm not going to go walking through the mud and the sand by that creek to go get them out from behind those bushes. So I just went on my way and just told the owner, hey, those folks are coming in on their horses again. And of course they said, okay, they'd send out a memo. But now I totally feel like that was our friend that was living there and was standing behind those bushes because I'd been being paralleled along the trail I was going. And I felt like a lot of times when I passed these these stumps, they were probably, I thought they were awfully tall for being cut down, but they were about, I'd say 6 foot, 7 foot tall, and they were like old growth timber in there, and they'd been cut down super high. I don't understand that, but there was one on each side of the road, and it looked like they'd been burnt at one time, and perhaps that's why they were cut down that high. I don't have any idea, but you could always feel like something was behind one or the other of those too when you went driving by. So it was very, to kind of give people an idea, this was heavily mossed trees, and as some people say, ants, they look like people frozen in space and time along the creek bank and and along the hillside and stuff. And it was full of ferns and tall grass and actually quite gorgeous, full of berries, salmon berries, and blackberries, and different things. Pretty easy for rabbits, birds, and anything that wanted to hide could hide there. So it wasn't like it was a barren place at all. It was a typical thick Oregon forest. And it just became heavier and heavier for me to go through alone. So I was down taking photographs of this one cutoff of the creek, went down this road. It was a very small road. It was very interesting for a photographer. It was beautiful down there. And then, as people say, that feeling, that feeling of being watched came over me, and it came over my dog at the same time. I swear I couldn't hardly get that machine into reverse and fast enough to get out of there. And the next day, I found out that the owner had put a camera in on the property, and a game camera. And after that day, that camera, not that knowledge of that camera, it's weird, but I don't know how to put it together any other way except that camera and my camera were linked together somehow, because after that particular day, and I had been pushing my camera until it showed like the infrared on the camera to get the perfect shot. And I'm now thinking, in my own little mind, conclusion is that the infrared on my camera and the infrared on the game camera were two things linked together, and I could not go past that place, that point on the road any longer. I could not. It was like I had a mental block put on me. I would be down there, everything would be fine until I got to that point, and I couldn't. It's like something was keeping me from going past there. I don't know if it was infrasound. I don't know what it was, but I wasn't allowed past there. And that particular part of the trail and road also connected with the property, part of the property that was behind our house, where they always seemed to stand and watch us cook. And so my husband was okay. He could go through there. But now somehow I was the enemy without doing anything wrong except the camera. And after that happened, we were, I don't know, it must have been just the next night or that night. We went to bed and all hell broke loose down there. Trees were being torn up. Breakage was happening. It was crazy. And my husband decided that he would go down into that part. It was totally undeveloped. And when he got down there, he found a swath of saplings that were broke off probably 6 feet high and higher. And it was just like somebody had gone through there and just arm in arm, break, 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 just made a big swath. And he found a pond there that we didn't know was there. We had no idea. This was after nearly 9 years there. And he found this big, big swath of trees broken in this pond. And in that pond, he found a footprint, which I sent Miguel the picture of a footprint in the mud. And we went ahead and had it authenticated by Cliff Erickman, because at the current time his museum's probably only less than 5 miles from us. And he said yes, that it was definitely a Bigfoot footprint. So what we were suspecting turned out to be true, and apparently that swath was broken out by a Bigfoot. And on my husband's return trip, he ran into quite a big structure down there where it was actually like a nest had been made in a kind of uh, it wasn't really a sinkhole, but it was sunk in. And they had all kinds of boughs in there. And there happened to be a couple of, he said, 4 big trees that had been put in there that were old. They were old ones with no bark, he said, but they had kind of put it up there. I said, well, probably teenagers. And he said, no, they were too heavy for teenagers to be putting them up in there, and something had been sleeping in there, and it smelled not very good. And he ran all the way to the house, pretty upset about what he saw, pretty excited. He ran to the house. He was out of breath. And my husband is Mexican Indian. He's a psychologist by degree from Mexico, and real cool, gentle guy. But he come through that door, and all he could speak was Spanglish. He was so wound up about what he found, and so excited that when he was down there, he didn't think about putting any marker beside that footprint. And there's no reason why he would think to do that anyway, because we had never watched any shows about how people always gauged a footprint with like $1 or something. We had no idea that people were doing that, because I think maybe Finding Bigfoot might have been on by that time, but we didn't watch TV. I was doing hospice, he was doing contracting, we were doing the woods. So he come flying up out of there, and he had a bunch of other photos too of everything else. However, he only sent me the footprint to show to Cliff, and all of the other photos he had on his phone went all bye-bye, I guess, because his phone broke, and he was learning how he could go recover all the photographs off of it. And we never made it to a person that could get those photos for us. And now the phone's burned up in our house fire, so we have no more evidence of what he had actually found down there other than the footprint, which was extremely important. We felt so good to have an answer to what all this craziness was, with so much activity around our house. They never touched our house. They didn't do anything but place any gifts there. And we feel it's because we were put the fruit out there, that They were excited about the fruit. They were returning for us. We didn't know anything about Bigfoot and people gifting Bigfoot either. We had no idea about marking things to see how long and wide and this and that footprint could be. We didn't know about hair collection, nothing. We were just babes in the woods. We were naive about the whole thing. And we feel kind of silly about it now, but you can't feel silly about things you didn't know. So a little bit after they had put that camera out, I don't know if this Bigfoot filled his stomach full of air and his lungs full of air or what, but this Bigfoot went off right by our house. And as I said, it was 44 feet long, but I can't tell you where he was standing, but we felt that scream. And it was like a lion and an elephant put together, but it sounded like a man. It's so weird. It didn't sound like an animal. It had a growl in it, and it had to have lungs like an elephant, but it sounded like a man that was just crying out gutturally, like they lost their mate or something. It was not mean sounding. It was more sad sounding than mean. Like I, I can't tell you what was going on, except that 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 camera had been put there, and that was their house, and somebody is messing around in their house, and they had trusted us all that time, and nothing had gone awry. They had never hurt our house. They'd never tried to steal our cats. Our cats were weary though. They if they got outside, they never left the yard at all. And we kept them on the patio because we had it fixed so they could be there. But they never nothing happened with our dog, or she was inside, but still it was like this type of live and let live was going on there. And then all of a sudden this happened. And when that went off, you could feel like air come through our bedroom window. And we had a cat door at one of them, and you could feel the air come through that. And I know that sounds unbelievable, but I'm just not a person to like tell lies. If it didn't happen, it didn't happen. But when it did, and I say it did, you better believe it because we were freaked out. So he's kind of, what the hell was that? And I didn't know. I was so dumbfounded. I go, it must have been a wolf. And it wasn't a wolf. It was like 50 times louder than any wolf. And it sounded so much like a man just going, like he was hurting so deep inside and pushing it all out. And my husband just lay there and stayed quiet, and I did too. And he fell asleep, and about 5 minutes later, I heard an answer from a couple canyons over, give an answer back with the same sound exactly. And we really, had felt like we had evidence. The one thing I didn't mention when I was down and taking the photographs and things, I heard somebody behind me and my dog kind of up in the woods. And it was really odd sound, and I can't say it exactly like it was said, but it kind of goes, hey. And I was like, that's weird. There's nobody in here right now, but somebody just said, hey to me. And then a couple days later, because we let people go walking in there, because there was a lot of folks that would bring their relatives, Chinese and Japanese people would come out because our woods was smell like Christmas every day. It was clean. It was beautiful. And when it rained, it really smelled like Christmas. It was beautiful. And so those folks would love to come out there. And one time I heard them talking. At least I thought I heard them talking, but it was garbled kind of gibberish, and it was kind of like it was something that sounded like maybe Japanese or Chinese that was close to the creek and the wind blowing and stuff. You can't tell. But when I got back up to where we would park, there was no cars in there, nothing. So now I believe that I heard gibberish from Bigfoot talking down there. And nobody can ever convince me different because it was nothing you could understand. But as I say, it's like maybe a foreign language with the wind and the creek being in your ears. And so, of course, you couldn't understand it. And it was not long after that, the gibberish, and we found the pond. He found the pond. We had the big scream. And we had the woods just like it lit on fire again, where there was breakage and everything. Sometimes we could go down there and find broken things. Other times, we don't know if they were just taking sticks and hitting trees. It wasn't really knocks. In fact, we never heard one knock while we were living there. Not one wood knock. We heard clacking. We never heard a wood knock. That is what we hear on these shows these days. We never heard that. We heard rock clacking, and we heard breakage all over the forest, like something was very mad, like just like an elephant running through there and just banging everything and breaking it down. And as I said before, no ice storm, no windstorm, nothing. It just like the woods lit on fire. And it went crazy for a little bit, and then it would stop. Everything would be peaceful, and we'd go, okay, we don't know what that was about, but it happened. So we decided that we needed to get away. So we took a overnight trip. We came back, and this was in 2017. We came back. It was June, and it was very nice. It was really warm that year, and we were driving down our country road. No, it was late, but we were all coffeeed up. We were all hyped up. We're not just married, but we're best friends. So we're just yakking all the time and talking about this and that. And um, both of us have had UFO experiences, and UFO experiences what we think together. And so we're always looking at the sky. So that night we're looking at the sky, and we're just on our road, and we're driving really slow. We're just not, we're, we're looking at the sky, not driving. And so we're going along there real slow and quiet. And we see something that looks like predator. And that's the only words that we could figure out that we could say that would describe kind of a blurry, watery thing that we saw in the going past the trees that were beyond our neighbor's yard, but um, we we saw this predator thing moving, and when it come in the headlights, it was a Bigfoot. A deer came out first, and that came out, and it took two big leaps to the middle of the road. It stopped barely and was still in stance of running. It stopped, it turned at the waist and looked straight at us. And we have never seen anything like that in our entire life. The eyes were red. They were probably 6, 8 inches apart. They glowed like red hot coals. It was not black. It was brown. It had blonde on its hump on its back. It didn't have a tiny head like some of the ones you see, like Cliff's in the museum. Looks like kind of a little pinhead guy. This this person had probably a probably I don't know. It was a huge head, like 2 feet by 2 feet or something. Its head was huge. Its its chest was probably we guesstimate because my husband's a contractor. He said it was easily 4 foot across. It looked like it was 2 feet thick or more, and its arms when it one was out in front of it as it kind of stopped because, like I said, it was running stance, and the other one was kind of in back, and you could see that one facing us was down. It would go beneath its knee in length. It turned. It turned, like I said, at the waist. Like it couldn't turn its head really. It just turned at the waist, and then it looked for that half a second, and it went onto the margin of the road, and it slipped at the ditch line in the mud and caught itself and just gone like a bird. It was just gone. Its face was kind of in the headlights. People say they're gray. I This was like it looked like real light milk chocolate. It looked like a dull kind of tannish color. It wasn't brown. It was kind of just a muddy color. And I think because the headlights probably made it look that way, but it had more longish hair. It had more like it had kind of like long hair on the sides, and it had mutton chops on its face, and you could see the brow ridge, and it didn't look so pug nosed. It looked more like a man, but its mouth was just a slit. It didn't have. I couldn't even make out. It was seconds, and I couldn't make out lips, but it just poof and was gone into the field of the name, and it went past the fence line and everything. So a corner post and was gone. So the next day we went back, and this happened as a crow flies without putting another curve in the road, probably 500 yards from our house. And so we kind of talked about it and talked it over and while he went to sleep. And the next day we went back up there and found where it crossed. We knew right where it crossed because of the corner post. And we found, which is, this is what we got pictures of too, where the toes, you could see the toes had dug into it was a real short ditch line medium, where it was like taking a step up a stairs, but it slipped off of that edge, and you could see where the toes grooved down into the mud there on the ditch line. And then you could see where it went into the trees. You could you could it's hard to explain. It was like a tree farm because there's tree farms all over here. But this is one that they had let go. And so it went between those trees and the corner post. We didn't find any prints before it was there. Like it made one big leap and it landed there and was gone. And those footprints were in the grass and they were still showing the next morning because it had landed there and it had sank into the dirt and mud there so deep that even pushing that grass down, when it came back up from being pressed down, it was still lower than the rest of the grass was in that area. So we could easily see it. My husband took measurements that day and they were 17-inch footprints there. My husband, being a contractor, just gauged it as around 8.5, 9 feet tall. And as I said, it had reddish hair, not real red hair, but reddish hair with, it looked like it had a blonde cape on its back. It was a lot lighter on its back. The the hair on the arms was kind of easy to gauge because when it stopped, it looked like it was probably 3, 4 inches long from the elbow down. And the legs were the legs were very, the calf of the leg was what I could see the best, and it was very muscular. I didn't see toenails or feet because my eyes were up midway, and um, we we didn't hear really. I don't think we even listened to hear if we could hear any more sounds around. We didn't go looking, and we didn't go do any wood knocks. We didn't do anything that would encourage them whatsoever. And by that time, we were getting to see finding Bigfoot a little bit. So by that time, we knew about the wood knock thing. And I just asked my husband that we not do that. And he agreed because we didn't want to trouble because we didn't understand anything about these these people, and we feel like they're not. Um, we feel like they're not just shouldn't be. When people say Bigfoot is my spirit animal, I just feel like that's not giving it the credit it needs. I don't feel like it's an animal. I feel like it's um, some sort of other being. And I know that, I mean, hey, everybody is, um, you know, gets to have their own opinion. And living with them around us that long and not having any danger and mostly curiosities and things that they did that were almost teasing, which I mean, we now think that Christmas Day was just them playing hide and seek with us. We were entertainment. And we think we were entertainment most of the time. We don't think we were ever in danger. And they respected us and we respected them. I'm not saying that they should be your pet. I'm not saying you should, be out there trying to hand feed them. I think respect is the best way to handle it and not get into, you know, gifting them because, I mean, habituating any animal can get you in trouble. Um, where I lived before in the wilderness, a lady moved into a cabin up there, and she started putting dog food out on her porch because there was a bear in the yard, and the bear was coming up on the porch. And then one day the bear broke through her front window. So why habituate Bigfoot? So that's that's our opinion about it. But we we were there for 9 years, and we feel that we were there uh, 9 years with Bigfoot family, and um, there was oftentimes at night that I would go to bed before we moved out in 2018 because I kind of um, got a little bit traumatized by the whole thing, and I still kind of get dreams about it. I didn't have dreams there. My husband didn't have dreams there, but whatever, we're getting dreams now. And um, my husband last week had a dream about a Bigfoot screaming in his ear. And the weird thing was the next day, I had like a dream of so stupid. I hate dreams, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I was dreaming that that Bigfoot had this face that looked so sad, and it said, "We're really missing you. When are you going to come out for a visit?" And that just blows us away that we're having any of this happen. So I I do beadwork and for my kind of to work things out. I don't dislike Bigfoot. I have my opinions about Bigfoot, but because of the kind of, I don't know, the stress that we had from it, I just sit and do bead beadwork of Bigfoot and just kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I'm upholding him or where I'm at with that, but I feel like he has a lot to teach us. And I have a whole bunch of other opinions of why it's not shared with us. But that's another time for another day. And and I just think that we all have to work together to find out what this is all about. And oh, my husband and I really believe you, Miguel, are going to be the one that actually comes through with the bounty on everything because you just seem to do it right. And we're not just saying that because you asked me so many times to come and talk to you about it. We just we just like your approach, and we think out of all the people that go out and knock on trees and do all this crazy stuff, that you're going to be the one that just runs into it and figures it all out. So I don't know what you think about that, but that's what we think about it.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Taya, and I also appreciate you for sharing your encounters and experiences with me. And it sounds like these things have been following you guys around for quite some time now.
Yeah, it it feels, honest to God, I know it sounds so hokey, really, Miguel. I know people, either it turns people into nice people or it turns people into ugly people. This topic, you know that, I know that. But I I feel like there's more to it, like almost at a spiritual level. Like if they pick you, then you kind of belong to them. Like, and since I have native culture, I feel so close to the mother and being um of the earth, not just on the earth. That I think that there's a oneness somehow there where they pick certain people that they know will be their brother, so to speak. Is that weird?
No, that makes sense. And why do you think they interact with certain people?
Because there's certain people that totally walk in beauty every day, and they are going to connect with those people that are soulful and aren't they don't have a black heart. They're not going to harm him. I I did mention to you that I lived with wolves for 14 years, and you cannot be around a wolf with a bad heart because they'll pick you out. They'll pick you out of a crowd pronto. And if you walk in beauty with them, they walk in beauty with you. And I think that Bigfoot, because wolves are like the dolphin of the land. Bigfoot is extremely intelligent. What is he? He's just the big man of the land. And he has been caring for this earth for a long time. When we've lost that, I mean, think of how many people have lost just loving the earth. They're in their cars, they're zooming around, they're this and that, and here and there and everywhere, but they're not taking 1 minute to sit down and go, okay, all you creatures in this world, we are brothers. And I mean, because I can, I don't know. I think if you walk with the clean heart, like I have birds land in my hands for me all the time. I think it's your heart and your headspace. And I think that that's when they connect to you. And I think if you put out that peacefulness, that they will come to you. I, I, I just have to make myself believe that because I was really traumatized by what I saw, and it wasn't necessarily that, but I grew up in the forest. I trusted the forest. I I was never afraid of anything. My granddad taught us everything. We were out in the wilderness up at Mount Adams picking berries. Bears were there. Everything was there. But somehow I felt forsaken because everything I trusted turned out to be not as true as I believed because there was a Bigfoot, And now all I can do is just call him Big Brother because somehow I think that's what he wants to be or always has been for us. But I have to remind you that there are Indian legends, and don't quote me, but I believe the Nez Perce Indians had a legend about the coyote and the seven devils, and the seven devils are mountains over in Idaho. They they always said that these devils would come across the Snake River, and they would take the children and run back. And then, long story short, coyote chased them back, and they stepped in a big mud hole over there, and all seven devils got locked into place. So, was that Bigfoot? Monsters? What? Eating children? Who knows? I think we're going to get stories different ways um, from all different Indian, Native American, indigenous walk of life. And since they've seen them in Mexico and people, their talk about them. And what about the petroglyphs all around the desert and stuff? There are Bigfoot footprints carved into stone there. And the ones that are actually Bigfoot, at least human footprints locked into stone out into the desert where they stepped in the mud and it now is petrified into rock. So Now, what's your theory?
regarding what these creatures are.
Yeah, and how can't they be our brothers? I mean, you know.
Yeah, they very well could be, and I think they've been here for a long time. And I do think
Mm-hmm.
that they are a form of primate, a form of human, and something unknown, as such as like an
Yeah.
advanced
Mm-hmm.
being. I feel like they've had more time to advance on this planet than us, and they have
Mm-hmm.
advanced spiritually, mentally, and physically. And I think there's a lot more to understand about them than it's just some unknown primate.
Right. I I agree with that too. I understand the primate part of it. It's and the mitochondria, and that leads to other things like, you know, what's been going on, you know. But uh, I to keep peace of mind for me is just to try to go out there. If I'm in the forest, just go out there with a peacefulness about me. And uh, you know, the best thing to do is keep your eyes open. And if you're unsafe feeling, then take a firearm. You don't have to be showing it off. You know, they're going to know it's there because they're going to smell it anyway. That's the thing. Really, I mean, we smelled it. Did it let us smell it, or did it naturally stink? Was it time when the female was in season? Do they have a rutting time where the male would smell different? We don't know any of that, but um, they, you know, they have their way of letting us know. We have lost a lot of our innate senses that would naturally tell us when we were in danger, because in thinking that we've evolved, we've probably digressed more than anything. And uh, all the animals out there have kept their senses. So when we step in the forest, they already know we're there. They have acute hearing, they have acute eyesight. And look at what the hawk can see a mile away. So these creatures can smell us, they can feel our footfalls. If you're wearing cologne, you're chewing gum, you're smoking cigarettes, you've drank a beer, they're going to smell that immediately. So, really, you know, when you go out there and you're trying to sneak in the woods, they already know you're there. So, why even sneak, you know? And um, I think I think you yourself are gonna find out so much more about it, and keeping an open mind, and you and Dave going out there together and doing different things. The I was sad. Who was it? Richard that had the footprints, or Dennis? He was such a good guy, the one with the blue healers and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
And I, I wish you could have stayed there in that area with that little bit of a project too, because I think there's a lot of openings there. Here, we were right on the edge of the Bigfoot corridor. Um, Cliff goes up. He has a place that he goes to, a meadow up there by Mount Hood. They find footprints. Cliff has never seen one. I think, you know, this is my opinion. You can let me know if it's yours or not. But don't you know that animals know when they're being hunted? And like if you're out there and you're like, got, because you're putting out the essence through your body, through your hormones. I got to find this thing. I got to find this thing. I think that's why Cliff's never seen one, because he's too intense about seeing one. And yet he's got his I'm not putting him down. He's a very, very nice person, and his wife is beautiful. We love him totally. But people just haven't seen him because of the pheromones that they're putting out themselves. And I don't know. I just got my own theories about it, but we feel blessed that we had this experience. In a way, we feel cursed that we had this experience. We listen to you and all your interviews. We listen to other interviews, and people are pretty much telling the same story about how the different things that they've done. And there's so much right now that, try not to make this a giant long um, video. I probably left out a lot of things, but um, there were so many little details, of things happening.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for sharing all that. And before we wrap things up, whenever you encountered, was it 2 separate Sasquatch that you had seen? Is that correct?
We no, one we saw one that crossed in front of the road.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt, though, every night I could feel the presence under a cedar tree right next to my bedroom. And it the one frond from the cedar tree hung down, and it didn't matter if there's wind or no wind. If I felt that present, that frond would be just slightly moving back and forth and back and forth. And I I just felt like it was like a female Bigfoot sitting there. No evidence of anything. I just felt what I felt. And I always expected to see a giant shadow come up over my window right by the head of my bed. And and it was just that gut feeling. And my a lot of times my gut feelings are totally, they always end up to be a reality. And um, my husband can attest to that. I've had witnesses of all kinds of stuff that I feel, and it comes to pass. But you know, I've also saw, UFOs and different things in my life. So is he. Nothing's beyond the realm of reality, really. But yeah, we saw only the one big giant Bigfoot, and we got the footprint. We got the other footprints. At least he got measurements on that one. Those two, actually. And we didn't measure the toe prints that were in that ditch line. But um, anything else any other details that you want to ask about?
Yeah, on the reddish colored Sasquatch, you mentioned that on his back it was like a lighter color. Can you go into more detail?
It it was in our headlights, so it was a reddish. It wasn't red. It wasn't orangutan color. It was a reddish brown. And whether the headlights was making it look reddish brown or not, it had it looked like a cape from the direction that I could see it. It looked um, like it was come down from the shoulder at the neckline, not like up on the neck, but across under the neck. It looked almost like it had a cape on it, like it went in a triangle kind of, and it was blondish, like it had just sat in the sun and got bleached out right there, is what it looked like. So it was kind of uh, it wasn't, like bleach blonde. Okay, it was kind of looked like a golden reddish blondish color up across the shoulders.
Yeah, that is
You
interesting.
understand
The
this?
Sasquatch that I encountered here, he was jet black, and he had like these two whitish gray stripes going down his back.
That is really interesting too. And let's just say that they can't be, all different. I wish that I knew the people that had seen uh, up this river called the Clackamas River, because a family a few years ago found a whole family of them up there on a road, and the children of the Bigfoot were playing in the trees and kind of bouncing on the limbs, and they actually, um, I think, if I'm not pushing all kinds of videos together in my head, that they had gotten a video of these little ones. It was kind of almost like they were sitting on them and letting them spring them back up in the air. And they found this whole family of them up there. And then the Oregon State ODOT camera up there in Mount Hood area has a Bigfoot cutting across in front of their camera, if you're interested in checking that out at all. But, I know it's Oregon, and Oregon's had a lot of sightings, and you guys are having your share out there too. But there's been, a friend of mine was up in a campground way up this Clackamas River, and they were up late playing cards at the picnic table, and they smelled something really terrible and saw a Bigfoot looking at him over the roof of the outhouse.
Well, I think that would be suffice for the podcast. And do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
So just thank you very much for asking me to come on your video.
Yeah, it's no problem, and it was a pleasure having you on the show, and I really do appreciate you for reaching out to me. And I know you've told your encounters in the past, and I'm not sure if they gave you enough time to kind of lay it all out there. And I know what it's like being on other channels, and they kind of cut you off before you can even get to the encounters, and kind of makes you feel a little isolated. But I hope that I gave you
Yeah.
enough time.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for, encouraging me to get hold of you and tell our story.
No, it's all right, and at least you got to tell the entire encounter before your sinuses started to kick back in. But yeah, I appreciate you for everything you've done, and for being patient with me, and for the encouraging words that you've had to say. A lot of people say that I'm going to be the one that gets these things on film.
Yeah, I think so. My husband thinks so. We sometimes I've missed your shows because I've gone, oh, Miguel's there, and I put your video in the library, and then we get busy on the weekend. But my husband's like, "Where's Miguel?" So anyway, I apologize for all my coughing, and it's just one of those things that happened. Anyway, you take care, and thank you very much.
Yeah, take care, Taya, and if you encounter anything else, feel free to reach back out to me.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You have a wonderful day. All right, Taya, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the state of Oregon. And it sounds like these creatures have been following you around for quite some time. I can't really be sure of that, but I get that impression with my experiences. And people talk about being marked and tagged, and possibly that is what happened with you. If that is the case, these creatures or beings are very much on point, and they are nature's top predators, or there is something supernatural going on that we cannot explain. What are your thoughts and theories regarding people being marked? Do you think it's just a predatory instinct, that these things are so good that they can find you no matter where you go? Or do you believe that there is something supernatural behind it, and there is a lot more than meets the eye? I definitely feel there's something supernatural or otherworldly about it. No doubt these things are flesh and blood creatures, and you can find tracks, hair samples, and they will bleed. But On the other hand, I do feel like they are possibly interdimensional. I don't know. When it comes to doing Bigfoot research, I try to look at this from a physical point of view because I am looking for evidence. And whenever you think about the supernatural stuff, it really leads you down a long, dark rabbit hole. And it can become really confusing. Sure enough, there probably is a supernatural aspect behind it, but these things are really leaving physical evidence such as structures, tracks, hairs, and I believe you can find a body. I could be wrong, but people say they've found strange things out in the forest, such as like primate skulls here in North America, so I'm hoping for the best, honestly. And if you think about it from a supernatural point of view, it becomes really difficult to do research, and you don't really see a point in looking for these things, which ultimately defeats the purpose of being a Bigfoot researcher. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Your support truly means a lot to me. And if you guys go out looking for Bigfoot, be sure to watch your back. Until the next one, be safe out in the forest.